I recognize the member from Guelph.
Speaker. Well, thank you. I support the purpose of Bill 156 to protect the property and safety of farmers, their families, and workers. As a matter of fact, Speaker, I voted in favour of this section of the bill at committee. But to overreach in the pursuit of this purpose, as the government has done with Bill 156, will only serve to undermine this purpose of the bill, which we all hope to achieve. This has been proven true over and over again in the United States, where so-called ag-gag bills have been struck down by the courts. As a matter of fact, just last Friday, North Carolina became the 5th state in the U.S. to strike down such a bill. Charter challenges to Bill 156 are inevitable. These high-profile court challenges will make Ontario the epicenter of animal rights activism and journalists fighting to protect the rights of free expression, free assembly, and investigative journalism. A research team at UBC has shown how such battles undermine confidence and trust and support for farmers and farming. At a time when we need to strengthen public confidence in local food and farming, the government's overreach will undermine confidence in Ontario farming. Many U.S. farmers who initially supported such bills have now come out against them. Chuck Jolly, a respected rancher from the great state of Kansas and a president of the Meat Industry Hall of Fame, has described ag-gag laws, and I quote, "What you are really doing is handing an issue to the anti-ag people and saying, yeah, I've got something to hide and I've got laws to protect me," end quote. Well, Speaker, those laws haven't worked, and Ontario farmers have nothing to hide. I grew up on a farm. I've spent my whole life marketing and promoting Ontario food and farmers. My successful local food campaigns were built on the premise that if we tell people the story of Ontario food and farmers, people will support them. Bill 156 undermines this. Speaker, a number of constitutional lawyers and law professors warned the committee that Bill 156 will face a charter challenge. The false pretense provisions in Section 4 and 5 violate Section 2 of the Charter, according to legal experts, infringing on people's rights to the freedom of expression and the freedom of peaceful assembly. In addition, both the Canadian Association of Journalists and Canadian Journalists for Free Expression told committee members that Bill 156 will criminalize investigative journalism. Think of that, Speaker. Criminalizing investigative journalism. Think of the essential undercover investigations from news organizations such as CBC's Marketplace, revealing the horrific conditions in long-term care homes. Bill 156 would make CBC journalistic standards for undercover reporting illegal in animal protection zones. Bill 156 could also criminalize undercover investigations into workplace safety at food processing plants such as the one the Toronto Star did to expose unsafe conditions at Fiera Foods. Bill 156 also puts a chill on the ability of employees to report an animal abuse issue. Humane Canada raised this concern because a worker witnessing some sort of abuse might be reluctant to report it out of fear of being charged under the false pretense provisions of Bill 156. This will undermine the ability to investigate animal abuse under the PAWS Act, which I support. We need stronger trespass laws, and we need stronger enforcement of those laws on Ontario farmers. But we can do this without violating people's charter rights and criminalizing investigative journalism. We can do it while maintaining the public's trust and confidence in Ontario food and farmers. I put forward amendments to strike this balance, Speaker, at committee. And while I appreciate the government voting in favour of amendments I put forward to respect Indigenous rights, I am disappointed that the government voted down amendments to protect the bill from a charter challenge. I understand why some of my farm friends are in support of this bill. No one wants to feel unsafe at home or in their workplace. As a matter of fact, I just received an email from a friend of mine who testified in support of the bill at committee and was harassed afterwards online. It's unacceptable, Speaker. But Ontario farmers and processors deserve a bill that provides these sorts of protections that will ultimately withstand a charter challenge and ultimately then benefit farmers, not hurt them. Thank you, Speaker.
Time for questions. The member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, and appreciate the speech that you gave, member from Guelph. You were in committee, you heard some of the things. You've touted the legal experts who wrote the letter. One of those legal experts presented at committee and admitted that she lobbied the federal government to not give COVID-19 supports to certain farmers, and those supports were to pay for PPE. Do you agree with that legal opinion that she put forward? And if you don't, then why should we believe her other legal opinions?
Member for Guelph.
Thank you. To my colleague opposite, there's a difference between providing a legal opinion and providing a political opinion. I disagree with this particular person's political opinion that PPE funding shouldn't go to farmers. That's a political opinion. I disagree with that political opinion. It doesn't mean I'm not going to respect that particular lawyer's legal opinion on the constitutionality of Bill 156, where this lawyer and 44 others signed a letter outlining the constitutional problems with this bill. In addition, we had legal professors come to committee, Speaker, outlining the constitutional problems under Section 2 specifically of the Charter that this bill likely results. The legal battles that are going to result from this bill, I believe, will hurt farmers and undermine the purposes of this bill.
Thank you. Further questions? Member for Sudbury.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the member opposite for his comments. And I think, recently we had someone who previously worked in the legal profession. We have someone who came from a farm. I think it's a good opportunity to talk about what we've been saying again and again about the importance of protecting farmers from feeling safe in their home, but also protecting farmers from legal challenges and other, constitutional challenges, and the damage that does to their profession and the perception people have of hardworking farmers. Is that something you could maybe comment on and try to explain?
The member for Guelph.
What I would say is that I had really hoped that we would have all-party support for this bill, because what I heard from some of the official opposition members and what people heard from me is that we recognize that trespass laws are broken in Ontario when it comes to protecting farmers and processing facilities. I think all of us could have agreed on a bill that increased fines, which this bill does. I think, most of us support that. I think most of us would support, or all of us would support, increasing law enforcement, maybe providing more resources to law enforcement to enforce the law. But the charter challenge that will result from this bill will undermine confidence in farming. We had UBC professors present such research, but I've also read a lot of other research from a variety of researchers across North America that has shown how this type of legislation actually undermines confidence in farming at a time when we need to increase confidence.
Further questions? The member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the member from Guelph, we had a presenter come in who's part of this group of lawyers who wrote this letter, who demonstrated in committee she had a distinct bias against some farmers. Does the member from Guelph not think that someone who admitted to having a bias against farmers would not have a bias when it comes to legislation for farmers?
Member for Guelph.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you to my colleague for the question. Here's the bottom line, Speaker. We had numerous lawyers, 45 lawyers, submit a letter. We had law professors submit a letter. We had researchers who have done research into how this type of legislation has been struck down in the United States and then had a negative effect on the perception of farmers, unfortunately. This isn't just one legal opinion. This is numerous legal opinions. In addition to the lawyers, we had organizations representing journalists talk about the constitutionality problems of this law, particularly as it relates to whistleblower protections and investigative journalism. So the member could try to disparage the reputation or the credibility of one particular witness. That's fair enough. But the overwhelming number of
Further
other legal
questions?
opinions.
Thank you. Thank you. Further questions? The member for Scarborough Southwest.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you to the Speaker opposite for his points. I think he echoed a lot of the comments that were made by the member from Brampton East as well as member from Timiskaming Cochrane, in the sense that this bill, which is titled "Protecting Farmers," and I'm glad we had committee. I'm glad people were able to come in and actually speak their mind, because there were a lot of positives and negatives, and that's what democracy should be. So my question is, when we hear feedback, when you have amendments, when you have good amendments, why didn't the government make these amendments that would have actually protected farmers in every way possible, especially in the constitutional sense that the member from Brampton East so eloquently pointed out? Thank you, Speaker.
The member for Guelph.
Thank you to the member for the question. And I certainly can't pretend to understand what the government's thinking is on this, to be honest with you. I wished I knew, because, again, I voted in favor of the purpose of this bill, spoke in favor of the purpose of this bill, would love to work with the government to work out a way to produce a bill that would protect farmers and food processors, that would strengthen trespass laws, increase fines for trespassing, but do it in a way that protects people's charter rights and protects farmers from a charter challenge. And why we were unable to, ultimately, reach that balance, and I feel like a number of the amendments I put forward would have reached that balance. You'll have to ask the members opposite in the next round of questions.
The questions? Member for Scarborough Southwest.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to ask the member about the whistleblower component of it, and I think that's the part that our members have pointed out as well. Talking about the constitutional rights of every citizen, but also farmers. And what the member from Sudbury pointed out, such an important point, which was, are we actually protecting the farmers? Are we actually making laws that are actually going to be held up in the courts? So I want to hear the member's point of view on that.
Member for Guelph.
Yeah, I'm deeply concerned about the way in which this bill violates whistleblower protections. We did hear from Humane Canada, which is, the humane societies essentially. They were strong proponents of the PAWS Act, but they came to committee, which the government passed, and I believe we all voted for it, if I'm not mistaken. But they were concerned that a worker who works at a facility, is gainfully employed, been there for a year or two, they see some sort of animal abuse for the first time in 2 years. They report that animal abuse. You could even argue they have a duty to report that animal abuse under the PAWS Act, but they could be charged potentially as that being false pretenses, that maybe somehow they lied in their application or somehow they got hired under some, nefarious way. And so it would put a chill on that type of whistleblower that I think is absolutely critical to a functioning democracy.
You have questions, member for Carleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to thank the member for his statement today, and it's great to have you on the Standing Committee of General Government. You know, the government also loves working with you, too. My question for you is, you know, you mentioned a lot about your experience in agriculture and how you come from a farming family. So, you know, I'd just be interested to know, you know, from the farmers in your area, and maybe also from your parents, you know, do your parents who have a farming background, I mean, do they believe that someone should be able to lie in order to get access, you know, to their property and livestock? You know, what your parents who are the farmers in your riding think? Thank you.
Thank you. The member from Guelph.
Appreciate that. So I just want to say that nobody, no farmer I know, and nobody I believe in this legislature believes in unlawful trespassing on farms. But I want to read to you the journalistic standards of the CBC. And I want to quote, "When the investigation bears on illegal or antisocial behavior or abuse of trust and the gathering of information of public interest, the journalist may need to infiltrate an organization to get firsthand information." That's journalistic standards. That's what a democracy is based on, is the ability to inform the public. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.